Imagine being handed a diagnosis for leukemia, and your doctor sits you down and basically gives you two entirely different options for how the rest of your life is going to look.
Right, which is an incredibly heavy moment.
Yeah, exactly. So option one, you take a highly potent pill every single day, indefinitely, forever. Option two, you undergo this intense, aggressive, system-shocking regimen of drugs for a strict, set period of time, and then you stop completely.
It is a profound dilemma, and it really cuts to the core of how we view illness and recovery, because you aren't just choosing a drug in that moment.
No, you're not.
You're choosing a fundamentally different philosophy of care.
Exactly. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we have our hands on results of a landmark, investigator-initiated, Phase 3 randomized clinical trial that tackles this exact monumental question.
It's a massive study.
It really is. We are exploring the absolute cutting edge of treatment for chronic lymphocytic leukemia, or CLL. And our mission today is to look at what this massive stack of clinical data means for you, the listener.
Right, whether you are a medical professional or someone currently navigating a complex diagnosis yourself.
Or honestly, just someone fascinated by how modern science is completely rethinking the fight against complex diseases.
Because what makes this specific trial so groundbreaking is the glaring gap it fills in the literature.
Yeah, the blind spot.
Exactly. For years, the medical community has possessed these two incredibly powerful treatment philosophies, continuous therapy versus fixed duration therapy. But we have lacked the robust, direct, head-to-head comparisons required to definitively say how they stack up against each other.
Especially in previously untreated patients, right?
Yes, exactly. We simply didn't have the side-by-side data until this trial.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because before we even get into the hazard ratios and, the microscopic blood data, making this choice is a universally understandable human dilemma.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about the psychological and physical difference between fighting a battle that has a clear, defined end date versus fighting a battle that technically never ends.
The mental toll is huge.
Right. Waking up every morning, looking at a pill bottle, and being reminded that you are sick forever.
That daily reminder carries a heavy burden. I mean, it shifts your entire relationship with your own health.
Yeah.
And before we reveal how these two philosophies fared against each other, we really need to understand exactly who is in this trial and what specific weapons they were using.
That's the only way to really grasp the stakes of the outcome.
Right.
So let's look at the setup. This trial involved 909 patients. And for a Phase 3 clinical trial in the oncology world, that is a massive, highly significant sample size.
It's a very robust cohort, yes.
And the crucial detail here is that these were patients with previously untreated chronic lymphocytic leukemia. So they are coming into this fresh.
Which is key. They haven't been subjected to prior chemotherapies or other targeted treatments that might skew how their bodies react.
Right, they are at the very beginning of their treatment journey.
Precisely. And the researchers divided these 909 patients into 3 distinct groups to test these different approaches. So group 1 represents our continuous therapy philosophy. That group consisted of 301 patients who were given continuous ibrutinib.
Just daily, ongoing treatment.
Exactly, with no scheduled end date.
So group 1 is on the indefinite path.
Right. Then we have our 2 fixed duration groups. Group 2 had 303 patients, and they were given a specific combination of 2 drugs, venetoclax and obinutuzumab.
Got it.
And then Group 3 had 305 patients, and they received a different combination, venetoclax paired with ibrutinib.
Okay, so you have 3 groups, roughly 300 people in each, testing one continuous indefinite approach against 2 different fixed-duration temporary combinations.
That's the setup.
I like to think about this using a modern analogy to really ground the medical terminology.
Oh, analogies are always helpful.
Think of group 1, the continuous ibrutinib therapy, like a subscription model for your health.
A subscription model. I like that.
Right. You are constantly paying into it, taking that pill every day, just to keep the system running and keep the disease at bay. But the fixed duration groups, group 2 and group 3, that's more like a one-time intensive system overhaul.
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it.
You bring the mechanics in, they completely rebuild the engine over a set period of months, pulling out all the stops, and then they pack up their tools and leave. But if both strategies are designed to keep the patient alive, why does the approach fundamentally matter?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the why matters just as much as the what.
How so?
We aren't just taking different routes to the exact same destination. We are using entirely different biological mechanisms to get there. It really comes down to how these specific drugs actually operate on a cellular level inside the patient's body.
Okay, let's dive into those mechanisms. From my reading of the source material, continuous therapy, specifically this drug, ibrutinib, belongs to a class called Bruton's tyrosine kinase inhibitors, or BTK inhibitors. And if I'm understanding this correctly, a kinase is basically an enzyme that acts like a cellular communication switch.
That's spot on.
It sends a continuous signal telling the leukemia cells to multiply, divide, and stay alive. So, taking this inhibitor is essentially cutting that communication wire. It blocks the signal so the cancer stops growing. Is that an accurate way to visualize it?
That is a perfect way to visualize it. You are cutting the wire, but the catch is the body is always trying to repair that wire.
Oh, right. Because the leukemia wants to grow.
Exactly. So the goal of a BTK inhibitor is constant, unrelenting exposure. You have to keep the drug in the system to ensure that wire stays cut day after day.
You cannot let your foot off the gas pedal.
No, you can't.
The moment you stop taking the pill, the signal resumes and the leukemia starts multiplying again.
Exactly. Now contrast that biological mechanism with the fixed duration treatments. Those combinations utilize a drug called venetoclax. And venetoclax doesn't just cut a communication wire. It operates on an entirely different premise. It targets a specific protein that cancer cells use to artificially extend their own lifespans and avoid dying off naturally.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. By blocking that protein, venetoclax actively triggers apoptosis, which is the programmed death of the cancer cell.
So it's not just freezing the enemy in place, it's actively clearing them off the battlefield.
Right. And because it's actively clearing the disease, the objective is to achieve such a deep, profound reduction of the leukemia during that strict set time frame that you can eventually safely take your foot off the gas.
You can actually stop.
Yes. You finish the regimen, and you get what oncologists call a treatment-free period. And achieving a long treatment-free period is widely considered the holy grail for a patient's overall quality of life.
Which brings us to the actual results. The primary goal of this trial, the big finish line that researchers were looking at, was a metric called progression-free survival at the 3-year mark.
Right.
And just to give some context on the timeline, the median follow-up for these patients was about 34.2 months. So right around that crucial 3-year window.
Yes.
Progression-free survival simply means the patient is still alive and their leukemia has not started growing or getting worse again.
And when the data came in, the results for that 3-year progression-free survival were staggering, primarily because of how similar they were.
I'm looking at the chart right now, and the numbers are incredibly tight. Across all 3 groups, the progression-free survival is hovering right around 80%.
It's remarkably consistent.
Specifically, it was 81.1% for the fixed-duration venetoclax obinutuzumab group. It was 79.4% for the fixed-duration venetoclax ibrutinib group. And for the continuous daily ibrutinib group, it was 81.0%.
81.1, 79.4, and 81.0. Statistically speaking, it is a dead heat.
Wow.
The researchers calculated the hazard ratios against the continuous group. Those came in at 0.87 and 0.84, by the way. And what those ratios proved is that the fixed-duration treatments officially met the strict statistical criterion for non-inferiority.
Major inferiority.
Right. They fell well within the tight 8 percentage point margin the trial established at 3 years to prove one treatment wasn't functionally worse than the other.
Okay, wait. I have to push back here on the medical terminology.
Sure, go ahead.
Because non-inferior sounds like the most underwhelming compliment you could possibly give a breakthrough medical treatment.
It does sound a bit dry.
It literally sounds like a participation trophy. Like, congratulations, your multi-million-dollar clinical trial proved you were just not worse than the other guy.
I know.
If I am a patient, I want to hear that a new treatment is vastly superior, right? Why is the statistical tie considered a monumental victory?
I completely understand why that terminology feels anticlimactic in everyday language. But in the context of oncology and this specific disease, proving non-inferiority is actually a massive paradigm-shifting victory. Think about what we are comparing here.
The subscription model versus the one-time overhaul.
Exactly. The continuous group achieved that 81% success rate by requiring patients to stay on medication indefinitely. every single day, absorbing the financial costs, the daily psychological reminder, and the ongoing accumulation of drug toxicity in their bodies.
Right.
But the fixed duration groups achieve that exact same roughly 80% success rate while allowing patients to eventually stop taking the drugs entirely.
Ah. So the victory isn't found on the medical chart in the form of a higher percentage. The victory is in the patient's daily routine.
Precisely.
Getting the exact same clinical outcome without making the patient stay tethered to a pill bottle forever fundamentally changes the human experience of surviving cancer.
That is exactly it. A statistical tie on the efficacy chart represents a massive upgrade in lifestyle. It removes the daily burden. It gives them a treatment-free period where they can just go back to being a person rather than being a full-time patient.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because progression-free survival was a tie on the surface. We established that. It's a dead heat.
Yes.
But when the researchers zoomed in, when they looked at a secondary endpoint of the trial by analyzing the peripheral blood of these patients after the treatment ended, the results were not a tie at all. They were vastly, wildly different.
This is where we look at a secondary endpoint called minimal residual disease, or MRD.
The study places a huge emphasis on this. From my understanding, looking for minimal residual disease isn't about asking the patient how they feel or looking at surface-level symptoms.
Oh, not at all.
It's about putting their blood under a highly sensitive microscope and looking for the absolute smallest microscopic hiding spot of the cancer. You are searching for the tiniest cellular footprint of the disease that technology can currently detect. Is that right?
Yes, that is the perfect way to describe it. We are looking for the absolute floor of the disease. If a patient achieves what we call undetectable MRD, it means our most sensitive advanced tests cannot find a single trace of the cancer cells in their peripheral blood.
Wow.
Yeah, it's as close to a clean slate as we can currently measure.
Okay, so keep those progression-free survival numbers in your head, listener. They all hovered right around 80%. A dead heat. Now listen to these undetectable MRD numbers because they're going to sound like a mistake.
They really are striking.
In the fixed-duration venetoclax obinutuzumab group, the undetectable rate was roughly 73.3%. Almost three-quarters of the patients had no microscopic trace of the disease in their blood.
Right.
In the fixed-duration venetoclax ibrutinib group, it was 47.2%, almost half. And in the continuous ibrutinib group, the undetectable MRD rate was exactly 0%.
0%. Not a single patient.
Zero. Meaning every single person taking the continuous daily pill still had microscopically detectable traces of leukemia in their blood.
That's right.
I have to admit, when I first read this in our sources, I was completely confused by the math. How on earth can the continuous group have exactly 0% undetectable disease, meaning the cancer is technically still present, hiding in the blood of literally everybody in that group, but they still have the exact same 81% progression-free survival rate as the other groups, where the disease was wiped completely clean in a massive percentage of patients? It feels like a biological contradiction.
It does seem counterintuitive at first glance. But if we connect this to the bigger picture and back to those cellular mechanisms we discussed earlier, it actually makes perfect mechanical sense.
Okay, explain that.
Think of the continuous treatment. The daily ibrutinib, like a heavy cast iron lid sitting on top of a pot of boiling water.
The water being the leukemia.
Right. The heat is still on. The water is still actively trying to boil. That is why the minimal residual disease is detectable in 100% of those patients. The disease is absolutely, unequivocally still there.
But it's not boiling over.
Exactly. As long as you keep taking that daily pill, you are keeping that heavy cast iron lid firmly in place. You are suppressing the pathway. The water never boils over. The disease never progresses.
Okay.
And that is why they still achieve that 81% progression-free survival. The lid works perfectly, but only as long as you never, ever take it off.
Wow. So the disease is present, it's just held in a permanent, chemically induced state of arrest. It's a standoff.
A permanent standoff. Now contrast that with the fixed duration treatments. Because venetoclax actively triggers cell death, it isn't just putting a lid on the pot, it is actively emptying the pot.
Emptying the pot entirely.
Yes. It clears the microscopic disease out of the blood entirely for a massive percentage of patients. That's 73% and 47% we saw. And that deep clearance is exactly why they can safely stop the treatment. The pot is empty, so you don't need to carry the heavy lid around anymore.
That analogy clarifies everything. The permanent lid versus emptying the pot. But eventually we have to move from the microscopic blood cells and the statistical hazard ratios back out to the whole human being sitting in the doctor's office.
Always. That's the most important part.
When we pull back the lens, What does this actually mean for their overall lifespan? Because that's what a patient actually cares about when they get a cancer diagnosis.
That is the ultimate question. It was another critical secondary endpoint in the trial: overall survival. And the data here is incredibly encouraging, regardless of which philosophy of care you look at.
Let's look at the survival rates. At the 3-year mark, overall survival across the board is exceptionally high. For the venetoclax obinutuzumab group, it was 91.5%. For the venetoclax ibrutinib group, 96.0%. And for the continuous ibrutinib group, 95.7%.
Those numbers are phenomenal. We are looking at well over 90% survival at 3 years across all 3 treatment arms, which means all of these tools are highly, highly effective at keeping people alive.
But of course, we also have to talk about the physical cost of that survival, because taking potent, disease-altering drugs is never without consequences.
No, every treatment has a profile.
The trial noted that the most common adverse events, the side effects across these treatments, were infections, gastrointestinal disorders, and cytopenias. And we really need to spend a minute here because this is where the rubber meets the road for a patient.
It absolutely is. Because the survival rates are so universally high, the side effects become the primary differentiator in the clinic. Let's look at continuous therapy first. When you are taking a pill like ibrutinib every single day, you often see persistent gastrointestinal disorders.
Right. Which sounds clinical, but in reality, that means you might be dealing with a mildly upset stomach, nausea, or diarrhea indefinitely.
Exactly.
Every single day for years. That is a massive grinding toll on your daily quality of life. You can't just brush that off.
You can't. It wears on a person. Now look at the fixed duration regimens. Because they are designed to completely overhaul the system and aggressively clear the disease in a short window, they hit the body much harder up front.
Makes sense.
You see much higher rates of what we call cytopenias.
And for you listening, cytopenia basically means your blood cell counts drop below normal levels.
Right.
If your red blood cells drop, you become severely fatigued.
Right.
If your platelets drop, you are prone to bruising and dangerous bleeding. And if your white blood cells are temporarily wiped out by this aggressive treatment, you become highly susceptible to severe infections. A common cold suddenly becomes a very serious medical event.
Exactly. So with fixed duration, you might be facing an incredibly grueling, exhausting 6 to 12 months where you have to be meticulously careful about infections and manage intense fatigue.
It's a very steep hill to climb.
It is, but there is a summit. There is a finish line.
So what does this all mean? We've thrown a lot of percentages, cellular mechanisms, and microscopic biology at you today. But when I step back and look at the whole picture, the takeaway feels deeply, deeply optimistic.
It really is an optimistic landscape right now.
If you're a patient facing a CLL diagnosis today, you are not choosing between a good option that will save your life and a bad option that won't. You have incredibly effective options, regardless of which path you choose.
That reframes the entire conversation in the oncologist's office from which drug will extend my life the longest to how do I want to live the life that is being extended?
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Because they all do the job exceptionally well, the choice becomes a deeply personal lifestyle decision.
It's about weighing those specific adverse events against your own psychology. Do you want the psychological comfort of taking a pill every day, knowing the lid is firmly on the pot, even if it means dealing with persistent low-grade stomach issues forever?
Right.
Or would you rather endure the intense, upfront physical exhaustion and infection risk of a temporary regimen, knowing that if you can just make it over that steep hill, there is a finish line waiting for you? This trial empowers patients to actually make that lifestyle choice without feeling like they are sacrificing their survival odds.
It is a triumph of modern medicine that we even have the luxury of having this debate. Deciding how to survive a leukemia diagnosis rather than just hoping to survive it is an incredible place to be.
It really is. Let's wrap up our mission for today. We set out to explore this monumental, investigator-initiated Phase 3 trial that finally compared continuous and fixed-duration treatments for chronic lymphocytic leukemia head-to-head.
A huge milestone.
And what the data definitively proved is that giving patients a finish line for their medication is just as effective as keeping them on it indefinitely. You can achieve roughly 80% progression-free survival at 3 years, whether you choose the daily subscription model or the intensive one-time system overhaul.
The clinical data has finally caught up to the patient's desire for a treatment-free period.
But before we let you go, I want to leave you with a final philosophical question, something to just mull over, because it built entirely on the data we just walked through, but it kind of breaks your brain when you really sit with it.
Oh, this raises an important question about what we're actually trying to achieve, doesn't it?
It does. Think back to that minimal residual disease data we discussed. The continuous ibrutinib group had a 0% rate of undetectable disease, meaning the leukemia was still microscopically present, hiding in the blood of literally every single person in that group.
The enemy was still inside the gates.
Exactly. Yet those exact same patients had an incredibly high 95.7% overall survival rate at 3 years. They were surviving, thriving, and living their lives, even with the cancer still inside them.
Because the lid was on.
Right. So here is the question to ponder. If a medical treatment leaves behind traces of a disease, if it fails to clear the microscopic footprint but still lets you live a long, progression-free life, does wiping out the disease microscopically even matter?
It's a fascinating thought.
It fundamentally challenges how we have been conditioned to define success in the fight against cancer. Is the ultimate goal of medicine to eradicate the enemy entirely, down to the very last microscopic cell? Or is the goal simply to negotiate a permanent, peaceful truce where the disease gets to stay, but you get to live? Allow yourself to mull that over. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time.